Aloha mai ohana. Aloha kakiaka. Good morning to you. Um, so we're broadcasting from Pauilo on the island of Hawaii. And this is Rising Voices, and we welcome not only our members, but also our viewing audience. Um, I get to do the opening prayer. So this opening prayer is about calling our ancestors in, because in the back of us, we all have a common ancestry. And what we're really looking for is that inherent knowledge that our ancestors passed on to us. So this chant I'm going to do calls from the various sites to bring our ancestors closer to us. They're just beyond the veil, and they're just waiting to share that information. So we'll just do that. Okay, so don't mind me. I kind of stumble with these things, but I'll try. E ho'i mai kaiki mai luna mai o nā mea una nui au e ia oe e ho'i mai e ho'i mai e ho'i mai e ho'i mai kaiki mai luna mai o nā mea una noi au o la hui e ho'i mai e ho'i mai e ho'i mai e ho'i mai kaiki mai luna mai o nā mea una noi au o nā poe e ho'i mai e ho'i mai e ho'i mai. And so what we're doing is asking the answers to bring that knowledge that the whole family out there is holding right beyond the veil. My. Thank you very much, and I'll send that over to Heather. Good morning, Heather. Oh, can't hear her.
Welcome, everybody. We're so happy that you've joined us today for this next installment of the virtual Rising Voices 8 meeting. I'm Heather Lazarus from the National Center for Atmospheric Research here in Boulder, or from home a few miles west in the mountains outside of Boulder. And together with Julie Maldonado from Livelihoods Knowledge Exchange Network and support from Olahana Foundation and Lomikai Media on the Big Island, we'll do our best to continue navigating this virtual space for Rising Voices. Please go ahead and introduce yourself, say hi, start a conversation in the YouTube chat feature. And a little bit of background first for anybody who's joining us for the first time. The Rising Voices program facilitates intercultural, relational-based approaches for understanding climate events, climate variability, climate change, and all the challenges that go along with those. The program brings Indigenous and other scientific professionals, tribal and community leaders, environmental and communication experts, students, educators, and artists from across the United States, including Alaska, Hawaii, and the Pacific Islands, and even around the world, to assess critical community needs and to pursue research aimed at developing optimal plans for community action towards sustainability. Rising Voices and all of us who work with the center acknowledge the inherent value of Indigenous knowledge systems and Indigenous science and adaptive practices and processes, and we honor these equally with those of the earth sciences. Really at its core, Rising Voices aims to advance science through collaborations that bring Indigenous and earth sciences into partnership, supporting adaptive and resilient communities through sharing scientific capacity, providing opportunities for Indigenous students and early career scientists through scientific and community mentoring. Some of you will have joined us already for other virtual working groups, and this month we are considering community relocation and site expansion. In these virtual sessions, everybody will have the opportunity to speak, engage, and ask questions in smaller breakout groups. More about that in just a sec. We'll do our best to do what we do when we're in person. We don't consider any of these themes in isolation, so we really invite you to make connections between the themes. Last month it was phenology. and all of the other important processes and situations with which we're living and dealing with right now. So a wee bit about the process today. We'll begin with a little bit of background. I'll hand over to Julie shortly. And then we will go into breakout groups. You'll have a Zoom link in emails from Julie, and I'll also put that link into the YouTube chat shortly. At that point, we'll be in facilitated breakout spaces and have a chance to engage around a few questions that we have to discuss. If you are watching through Google Meets, just please stay there. And then we will come back to YouTube and or Google Meets for the plenary session to wrap things up and hear brief breakout group reports from each of the groups. And with that, I'll hand you over to Julie.
Thank you, Heather and Hank, and everyone who's joining today. We recognize there is an abundance going on these days, and somehow because we're virtual, we're supposed to be 3 places at once, and so we especially appreciate your time and support and commitments these days, and especially today in acknowledging that you're joining us on this Juneteenth Emancipation Day and reflecting together kind of on where we have been and where it is we need to go. And for this session today, as Heather mentioned, this is turning to the community relocation site expansion theme. But again, remembering that part of the positive aspect of doing it this way now in virtual is that we can be engaging in multiple conversations, multiple themes, and thinking about the intersections between these. And so we strongly encourage, for those who are on the phenology sessions last month and energy coming up next month, of continuing to think about these cross connections. And today what we're really focusing on is we want to think about what does sharing our visions look like of what a just relocation process really looks like, right? What's your vision, and what kinds of collaborations can help get to that vision? Thinking about your own personal roles and what is your positionality, what is your responsibility in this process? What is do you envision for your role in working towards this vision of a just relocation process? And we also think about the role of sciences when it's driven from this vision for a just relocation. And to think a little about where we've been in this conversation. We've been had incredibly lucky and gracious of having Bill Thomas with the National Oceanic Atmospheric Administration, Office of Coastal Management, and Aranza Zulaskarian with the Southeast Climate Adaptation Science Center, has been leading the Rising Voices Community Relocation group for the past year in bi-monthly conversations. And what they're going to do here, I'm going to pass this over to Bill in a minute, to highlight some of what emerged from last year's Rising Voices workshop from that community relocation working sessions, highlight some of those themes. And then Aranza will be speaking a bit to what emerged from the panel session that we held leading up to this event a couple of weeks ago. And so with that, I will turn it over to Bill Thomas. And again, thank you for everyone being part of this, and excited to have a conversation together in the breakouts in just a bit. Over to you, Bill. Oh, Bill, I think you are still muted.
I was just testing to see if you're paying attention. Thanks, Julie. Mahalo. Like Julie said, Bill Thomas, and I'm calling in from Haiku Valley in Kaneohe on the island of Oahu. We're on the real nice side. It's on the windward side. We have very distinctive mountain ranges, the Ko'ola mountain range, where the sunrise is just amazing. It's a very distinctive mountain range, but also when it's raining, I can count at least 40 or if not more waterfalls from my house. It's a nice, very nice place to be calling in from. Anyway, a quick summary of things that have occurred over the last several months, since last year, in fact. Site relocation. We've discussed many, really a plethora of issues and things, but they've coalesced around I think a few major themes. One is, sort of Julie had sort of alluded to it in what our goals for this session are about your hopes and aspirations and what your vision would look like as far as relocation and a just and fair process. So around community, really it needs to be community led. So and a balance between what types of projects do we have that are led by the community, but also the involvement of local organizations and community input, because in many cases we have projects that are proposed by, through a community, but come in through either federal government or nonprofit, and they don't necessarily have the same voices involved. So having that community voice from the beginning on every part is really important, from the concept to the decision making, and that's partially what this session is about. The other is that the research and studies that are done, while on the agenda we have culturally sensitive, it's also culturally driven. And, it's the lens through which the issues are seen. It's very localized. And while we have, speaking from a Fed, I work in a number of areas. And while I might go in with great intentions, I'm not from there. So I don't really know what those issues are from their perspective. So I need to understand that. We need to have that really good exchange of information to be able to understand the lens through which we see these things as we come to the table to look for solutions. The other is that, we have many, many groups within the relocation discussion that are growing through these issues, from Alaska to Southeast Louisiana to the Pacific Islands to the Caribbean, up and down the U.S. West Coast, all these coastal areas, as well as the middle of the U.S., because climate impact is pretty severe in many cases. But to have much more exchange of information, engagement among the different groups that are doing these things are really important. And we need to be able to figure out a way to provide a vehicle for that, because although the circumstances may differ, many of the approaches may be similar in that the way in which they engage with these groups that are there to help, as well as the way in which they have their communities engage with those others. Another is, and it's a big issue, and it's data sovereignty. And I get back to culture-sensitive, culture-driven research. Is what is the data for? Who's it going to help? Who controls it? And in the end, when somebody comes in to do research, especially from the outside, just make sure that that data is controlled, owned by the community, but also for purposes of the community. And there's a lot of other issues involved in that, but that's sort of the main gist of it. And another one that comes up quite often is with relocation. We've seen examples of if you relocate, you can't go back. Well, relocation doesn't necessarily mean that you lose the rights to those resources there. And whether you're land-based or landed and coastal-based, you still have access to those resources, and many of it is there in statute. It's in the treaties. What's really important is not just as a group for us. I talked about it earlier, but also as a group of rising voices with different working groups. It's really important for us to stay engaged with them, because there are points of leverage and overlap among them. And that's something else that came up. And just as, as a reminder for those who have been on these calls, but also for new ones that, and Julie had mentioned earlier too, is that our site expansion relocation working group meet every other month. And Aran Suzu, who's speaking in a moment, and are the ones that sort of just lead it in that we come up with the questions that help to facilitate where you decide to go with all of this. So with that, I will turn it over to Aran Suzu. And thank you so much for being patient, and agree with my test to see whether I was unmuted or not.
Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for being here. I'm so pleased to be in company with you all. And I just wanted to give a thank you for the participants that were part of the pre-recorded session that accompanies today. And I want to thank Leslie Lakua, Chief Albert Naquin, J.R. Naquin, Julia Nogueras Vidal, Christina Peterson, and Isabel Rivera Collazo, and also Mark Skaggy. So in this pre-recorded session, we asked the group of panelists to talk about 3 questions that we posed, and those were, what are your community's priorities in considering relocation and site expansion in your homeland or territory as part of your overall adaptation to climate change? So what are your community's priorities? And then second, what challenges are posed by the state and or scientific institutions in implementing those priorities? So challenges. And then 3, what are the community practices in healing from these community relocation related processes? So the healing. And so we had a very fruitful, very moving, very poignant conversation about these questions with our panelists. And so I invite all of you, if you haven't already, to please look at the pre-recording of these wonderful, amazing voices. And it was such a rich conversation. I was just trying to think about so many of the things that came up related to issues of intersections with food security and sovereignty, land tenure issues, and all the very layered climate impacts as well. So not just things like sea level rise, but the challenges with erosion and heavy precipitation events, landslides, and also some of the more poignant challenges like how to purchase land, all the various inputs that go into sort of a community-led process into relocation and site expansion. So that's just a very short overview. Again, really offer the opportunity to look at that pre-recorded session if you haven't already. And again, many, many thanks to these panelists who shared their voices and their experiences. And I think we are getting ready to go to the breakout sessions. And let's see.
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
You're right. I did paste, this is Heather, I pasted the Zoom information into YouTube prematurely a few minutes ago, and for some reason it's not allowing me to do it again. I don't know if anyone else is watching can pop that in there, otherwise I'll keep trying. My little blue arrow has rayed itself out.
Okay, let me see if I can do that. I've got the Zoom information here, Heather.
Okay.
Let me pop this in right now. Oh, and I could do it into the Zoom. I mean, into the YouTube one, right?
YouTube, please. Yes, please.
Yeah, YouTube. Okay, here we go.
And then everyone, soon you will see that Zoom information coming through the chat. Like I said, it's also in emails from Julie, and I put it in if you scroll back in chat a few minutes as well. So at this point, we will break into that Zoom room where we will all go into our breakout group discussions. And so we hope to see you over there. Please email the help desk if you have any problems with this at all.